Hey everyone, Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and I am super excited because 2024 is over, 2025 has begun, and that means it is time for my top 10 best reads of 2024. So these are not books that were published in 2024. Actually, I don't think any of them were published in 2024. But these are all the books that I read, out of all the books that I read in 2024, these are my 10 favorite that I read during the year. There might be some surprises here, and there might be some that are not so surprising if you've watched my channel this past year. But I am here to tell you as well, with 2025 here, things are about to get a little more normal on the channel. I am finally at a spot where we have our house mostly put together. I'm still waiting for some bookshelves to arrive so I can set up our upstairs library, which as soon as that's done, I will reveal it. I've been filming along the way and taking video as we've been working on it. So as soon as it's done, I am going to show you the library and you will get to see it. But until then, here I am recording from the living room. So let's get into this list, the top 10 my favorites from 2024. So at number 10 is an ebook that I read, and it's a book that I did not have on my radar except through the Readsy Discovery Program, which might come up again in this list. But I read one of my favorite books of the year. This comes in at number 10, and it is Nemesis and the Vault of Lost Time by P.J. Davis. This book was so much fun. It had like a really interesting apocalyptic idea of how the world could end that was really different from anything else that I ever read. Plus it had some great characters that were just so much fun to read and made me laugh out loud. The adventure was there, the humor was there, the mystery was there, the end of the world apocalypse was there. I loved this book. I thought it was so much fun, and I cannot wait to see if there's ever going to be a sequel to this book. I would love to see a sequel to Nemesis and the Vault of Lost Time. It was just so interesting. I think this book is great if you're fans of Brandon Mull or any of those kind of fantasy books where there's like a lot of twists and turns and different things happening, lots of interesting characters and locations to visit. This is definitely a book up your alley. Go check it out. So at number 9 on my list is a Goosebumps book from the original Goosebumps series. And this one was surprising to me. I thought about this for quite a while. Did I actually want to put this on my top 10? And then I decided, yes, it needed to go on the top 10. But then the big question was where to put it. And I think number 9 is exactly where it needs to be. And that is book number 41 in the Goosebumps series, Bad Hair Day. This book surprised me quite a bit. And I know this is not like a lot of people's favorite Goosebumps book. In fact, some people think this one's really boring and don't like it at all. I really loved it because I felt like it was weirdly timely. It was like about a kid who wants to be a magician and might see his dream realized at some point, but not in the way that he wanted. And I really feel like this was a book that like struck a chord with millennials, especially because we were told when we were growing up, you can be anything, you can do anything, like whatever your heart dreams up, you can go do. And I think as we've gotten older, we're like, I don't know if that's really super true, but this book really tackles that, like kind of like just giving up dreams and all those sorts of things. I thought it was so interesting. Although the little sister in it is why it's at number 9, because the little sister is so annoying. Probably one of the most annoying characters in a Goosebumps book, in my opinion. So I really couldn't stand her, but the rest of the book really captured my attention and I thought it was so interesting. Plus, I like to do magic tricks. I do a lot of magic trick shows. So I thought that angle was really interesting to read. So this one is number 9 for me, Bad Hair Day. And then at number 8 is a book from a new series that I've discovered this year that I've really enjoyed. This is actually the 5th book in the series, and it's my favorite of the series for sure. And that is book number 5 in Matt McMahon's series, Monsterious, Trapped in the Horror Dome. This book was so much fun. I really loved it. It was like action, adventure, mystery, horror, all the things. A monster that's super scary, some good motivations, great villains, great characters. It just had all the things that were so much fun. There's one sequence later on in the book that really reminded me of like an alien movie. It just, so many things were so good in this book. And I don't know if you saw the news, if you follow Matt McMahon on Instagram, but he recently reached the USA Today bestsellers list with his first book in this series, Escape from Grimstone Manor. So if you have been sleeping on this series, you better go check it out, because this is a great 5-book series. I really hope we get more of them, because they're just so much fun. They're so interesting. Every single one's a little different, but not in a way that's like, oh, this is totally different, like book in the series and doesn't seem like any of the other books. They're like all following this great idea of a monster in the book, and they're so well done. I cannot wait for more. And so here is book number 8 on my list, Trapped in the Horror Dome. And then book number 7 is a surprise. As I was going back through all the books that I read over 2024, I saw this one again and I thought, oh, that was a great book. I really enjoyed it, mainly because it was so creepy and had such a great idea of something to do with, well, I can't tell you because that's spoilers. So this is book number 5 in the Spine Tinglers series by M.T. Coffin. Check it out and die. This book was so great. It has such a great hook. It has like these kids who are reading these books that are in the horror section at the school library that have been brought by this new librarian. And as they read the books, they get sucked into them and scary things are happening. And I loved this book. It was so much fun. I think on retrospect, one of the reasons why I liked it is because I have some mad nostalgia for the Page Master movie with Macaulay Culkin back in the day, and this kind of reminded me of that a little bit. So this book was a lot of fun. It had some twists, it had some turns, and one of the things at the end, it was so interesting. And I thought, that is fascinating, and I feel like you barely explored that idea. But this was just a lot of fun. It's another one of those 90s Goosebumps kind of ripoff series, but this one stands up on its own and is actually kind of disturbing and a little bit scary. I feel like it was scarier than any Goosebumps book I've read for sure. I thought it was so much fun. And then book number 6 is another ebook, and this one's also from the Readsy Discovery program. I found some fun books through Readsy Discovery. If you don't know what Readsy Discovery is, it's kind of this way for authors to connect with reviewers and let them read their books for free, but then also the reviewers give honest reviews. And I give honest reviews. If I don't like a book, I will say so. So on this particular one, it blew me away. I had so much fun with it. It is book number 3 in the Creepy Jeepers series, It Came from the Pumpkin Patch by J. Peter W. And this book was so much fun. It was really creepy, had a great hook. It had like this really great like angst throughout it where you just really connected emotionally with the character. I feel like that's one of the things that's interesting about a Goosebumps book is Goosebumps books, you don't ever really like empathize with the characters. You don't really like, they're just kind of like, they're characters there to make sure the plot happens. In this book, the plot does happen, but you have these great characters in the mix that have real like feelings, real issues, real things going on in their lives that are difficult to deal with. And J. Peter W. handles this so well. I feel like it was so much fun. There are other books in the series, and I believe there's another one coming out sometime soon. And I've read the first one as well, and it was also so creepy. So creepy. It Came from the Pumpkin Patch had a great finale sequence that was so much fun as well. I loved this book. It was a lot of fun. And then at number 5 is another Goosebumps book. And this was Goosebumps Series 2000, which, if you watch my channel, you know that The Mummy Walks, that book to me had one of the best opening hooks of any Goosebumps book. But this Series 2000 book was one of my favorites, and I really loved it. And that is book number 1 in Series 2000, Cry of the Cat. This one was scary. I did not know going in, like, how are cats going to be creepy? Like, how are you going to do this, R.L. Stine? But he did it. He delivered. This book ended up being super creepy, super interesting. I really loved it. The twists and turns, the ending has such a disturbing moment. Like, it was so fun. And I actually watched the Goosebumps episode of this one back, and it was really interesting how they took the episode and they changed some details about it, but in a really good way that I thought made it just as interesting as this book is. So definitely, if you're looking for a good Goosebumps book to read, that this one is also, people actually like this one a lot other than Bad Hair Day, which people don't always love. This one, though, people love, and it is worth the hype. It was such a good one. I cannot recommend it enough. And then at number 4, we have a third and final ebook for the list. So this one is actually a nonfiction book, but I didn't read that much nonfiction this year, and I was thinking about doing a nonfiction list, but I decided, nope, this book deserves to be on my top 10 because it really was one of my favorite books from 2024 that I read. And that is a book by Ken Williams called Not All Fairy Tales Have Happy Endings. And this book is all about the Sierra Online game company that Ken Williams and his wife Roberta Williams started way back, I think it was in the 70s, if I have it right. They started this company, or maybe it was the early 80s. I can't quite remember the details, but I read this book and I plowed through it. It was like all the behind the scenes stuff that happened at Sierra Online and all the different like development of different adventure games that they created. That was their big thing they did, was adventure games, which if you don't know what adventure games are, they're PC games that they started off where it was like kind of like text on a screen. It would say things like, you're standing at the end of a canyon. You can go north or you can go south. What do you want to do? And then you could type in like go south or look around or examine, and different words that would help you solve puzzles that you came to in the game. Well, then fast forward, Roberta Williams actually was one of the pioneers of graphic adventure games where they put pictures on the screen and then it turned into moving pictures. And that's one of the things that Sierra Online did all throughout the 80s and 90s, was create all these games. So they created so many fantastic games, and this was such an interesting story of like the behind the scenes of what happened. So I love this book. I read it, I believe, in one day. And it was a 400 something page book that I just plowed through. I could not stop reading it. So it was definitely a must read if you're into computer gaming, if that's part of your fandoms, your like cross section of fandoms, check it out for sure. All right, we're in the top 3 where I hemmed and I hawed and I shuffled these books around so many times to try and figure out where do I want to put all these books. So I finally figured out my top 3. And I'm pretty happy with my top 3. They're all books that made me feel something, that had adventure, that had action, that had fantasy in them, and were a lot of fun. So number 3 was book number 2 in the Exatorn Adventures, Segra and Stargull by Peggy Downing. This book series, I binge read these back to back to back to back. There's 6 of them in the series. This one, I loved it so much. It had like this Legend of Zelda Wind Waker vibe where they're going to different islands and there's palm trees and there's this like bird that's like this kind of magical bird that's helping them. It had all the things. It was so much fun. It really built on the world that Peggy Downing had begun in Brill and the Dragators in book number 1, and it just was so fascinating. This is an older series. It's a Christian fantasy book series, and it is hard to find. I finally have my own copy of this book after searching and searching. I finally got a copy that was not like $200. So I was happy about that, but I just went for it. And this book, so good. If you get the chance to read these, if you like Christian cozy fantasy, this is such a good book. Cannot recommend it enough. And then book number 2 on my list, this one was one of my favorites. It made me cry. I definitely cried at the end of this book. I gasped out loud at this book. I said, no, you can't do that at the end. I loved it so much. and it is book number 1 in the series of C.C. Rios and the Desert of Souls by Kayla Rivera. This book was so good. I loved it so much. It has fantasy, it has a little bit of horror in it. It has like adventure and heart, mystery that is so interesting. I loved this book so much. Definitely check out my review if you're interested in learning a little more with no spoilers. I cannot recommend this book enough. I have not read, there's 2 more books in the series. I have not read them yet because I'm so nervous to read them because this one was just so good that I don't want those to get ruined or to ruin the experience of it. But I do have them. I just am nervous to read them. But I loved this one so much. And this one can kind of stand on its own. There's definitely some mysteries left at the end that you're wondering like what's going to happen with that. And there's definitely I would call it like a mild cliffhanger. Everything's wrapped up, but there is something that happens at the end where you're thinking, oh, how's that going to play out? So definitely super interesting. If you are into fantasy, like folklore fantasy, this is so good. I cannot recommend it enough. Definitely check it out. All right, it's time. My number 1 favorite book from 2024. This, like I said, C.C. Rios and this book, I kept flip-flopping them, wondering, should C.C. Rios be number 1? Should this book be number 1? I kept going back and forth. And finally, I just decided. I said, nope, I know which book needs to be number 1 because it made me feel something. I cried at the end of it. It was so beautifully wrapped up. I loved it. It was book number 6 in the Exotorn Adventures, Brill and the Puffire Volcano by Peggy Downing. This is the book I found when I was in Alabama, off chance. I just found this book on the shelf and I was like, what are these? I've never heard of this fantasy series before. I picked it up. I picked up 2 of them that day, this one and book number 4. And I slowly found all the rest of them and I binge read the entire series, like I said. This one, though, is one of the best wrap-ups to a fantasy book series I think I've ever read. It's so cozy. It wraps everything up so well. The ending made me cry. It was exactly like what I wanted, and I was satisfied with the end. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, I wish there were more. But then I was like, no, I actually feel like this is perfect. This series is perfect. It doesn't need any more, doesn't need any less. It's exactly right. I loved this book so much. It changed up the formula. It had some moments where I was legitimately wondering, what are you going to do with this? Like, how are you going to wrap this up? How are you going to solve these issues that are going on? It takes you to some new locations in the fantasy world. There is some real danger here. It was so good. I loved it so much. This was definitely my favorite book of 2024. A book from the 1980s that was written so long ago and is so hard to find. But this one, definitely my favorite from 2024. So what were your favorite books from 2024? I'd love to hear your top 10, your top 5, your top 3, your top 1, whatever it is, down in the comments below. Have you read any of these books? Let me know that as well. And until next time, everybody, keep reading. Bye.